Ethan Blackwood looked at his wife, a woman who had scrubbed diner floors just to pay for his coding boot camp, and called her a bad investment. He tossed the divorce papers onto the table, convinced he was cutting off dead weight to trade up for a CEO's daughter. But arrogance has a funny way of blinding a man. Ethan didn't know that the woman sobbing on the floor was the secret sole heiress to the Kensington Vane shipping empire. By walking out the door, he didn't just break her heart, he unknowingly unlocked a hidden clause in her grandfather's will, handing her the $1.4 billion fortune he had spent his entire life chasing. The envelope on the kitchen island wasn't thick, but it was heavy. It sat there, stark white against the faux granite laminate that was peeling at the corners a countertop Danielle Mitchell had tried to fix with superglue 3 months ago. Danielle stared at it, her hands trembling. She wiped them on her apron, which smelled faintly of grease and burnt coffee from her shift at Joe's Diner. Her feet throbbed. She had walked home in the drizzle because the transmission on their 2014 Civic had finally given up the ghost 2 blocks away. "Ethan," she called out, her voice cracking. Ethan Blackwood stood by the window, his back to her. He was wearing the charcoal suit she had bought him for his interview at Apex Tech, the suit that had cost her an entire month's rent. The suit she had eaten instant noodles for 4 weeks to afford. He looked sharp, successful, and utterly unfamiliar. "It's done, Danielle," Ethan said, not turning around. His voice was devoid of emotion, like he was reading a line of code that needed debugging. "I filed this morning. My lawyer says if you sign now, we can avoid court. It's cleaner this way." "Cleaner?" Danielle laughed, a sharp, hysterical sound. She walked toward him, reaching out to touch his arm, but he flinched away as if she were contagious. "Ethan, we've been together since sophomore year. I worked double shifts while you built that app. I paid the server fees when Apex almost went under. We promised to support each other," Ethan interrupted, finally spinning around. His eyes were cold, blue ice. "And you did. I appreciate that. But look at you, Danielle." He gestured vaguely at her damp hair, her stained uniform, the exhausted slump of her shoulders. "You're stuck," he said. "You're happy being a waitress. You're happy with this." He waved a hand at their cramped, 1-bedroom apartment in the gritty part of Seattle. "I'm not. Apex is taking off. We just secured Series B funding. I'm going to be meeting with investors in Zurich, in Tokyo. I need a partner who fits that world. Someone who understands the stakes." Danielle felt the blood drain from her face. "You're leaving me because I'm not fancy enough?" "Ethan, I'm a waitress because I'm paying off your student loans. I put my nursing degree on hold for you, and that was your choice," Ethan snapped, adjusting his cuffs. "I never asked you to be a martyr, Danielle. I needed a partner, not a crutch. And frankly, we've outgrown each other. I need someone who can walk into a gala and not look like she's worried about the tip jar." The cruelty of it took her breath away. This was the man she had nursed through the flu, the man she had held when his father died, the man whose dreams she had watered with her own sweat and tears. "Is there someone else?" Danielle asked, the realization hitting her like a physical blow. Ethan hesitated. For a split second, a flicker of guilt crossed his face, but he stamped it out instantly. "That's irrelevant. This is about us. It's about the fact that I am ascending, and you are stationary. I'm willing to be generous. You can keep the furniture. I'll give you $5,000 to get set up somewhere else." $5,000? Danielle whispered. "Ethan, our joint account has $40,000 in it, money I saved. Money that is tied up in Apex assets now." Ethan lied smoothly. She knew he was lying. She could see it in the way he touched his tie, a nervous tic he'd had since college. $5,000 is a gift. Take it. Sign the papers. Don't make this ugly." He checked his watch, a Rolex Submariner. New. Expensive. "I have a dinner reservation at the Pierre at 8, he said, checking his reflection in the hallway mirror. "I packed a bag. I'll send a mover for the rest of my things on Monday. Don't be here when I come back." He walked past her. The scent of expensive cologne, Santal 33, definitely not something she bought him, lingering in the air. He didn't look back. He opened the door, stepped out into the rain, and closed it with a soft, final click. Danielle stood frozen in the hallway. The silence of the apartment was deafening. She walked to the window and watched him get into a sleek, black sedan waiting at the curb. It wasn't an Uber. As the car pulled away, Danielle saw the silhouette of a woman in the passenger seat. She had blonde, perfectly coiffed hair. She leaned over and kissed Ethan on the cheek. Danielle fell to her knees, the laminate floor hard and cold against her legs. She wasn't just heartbroken, she was destitute. She had $82 in her personal checking account. Her name wasn't on the lease. Ethan had insisted on putting it in his name for credit rating purposes. She looked at the divorce papers on the counter. Plaintiff: Ethan James Blackwood. Defendant: Danielle Marie Mitchell. Lowest moment, she whispered to the empty room. This is it. It can't get worse than this. She was wrong. It could get worse. And it would, before the truth came out. 3 days later, Danielle was sitting on a moth-eaten mattress in a motel room that smelled of stale cigarettes and despair. The Starlight Motel was the kind of place people went when they wanted to disappear, or when the world had already made them disappear. She had signed the papers. She had no money for a lawyer to fight him, and the humiliation was so thick, she just wanted to sever the limb to stop the bleeding. She took the $5,000 Ethan transferred severance pay, she called it bitterly, and moved out. But the universe, it seemed, wasn't done kicking her. On Tuesday morning, she had gone to the bank to deposit the check, only to find her account frozen. Apparently, the joint account she shared with Ethan had been flagged for suspicious activity due to a massive withdrawal he had made, and the bank had temporarily locked all associated accounts, including her personal one. She had exactly $38.50 in cash. She sat on the bed, staring at the television without really seeing it. The local news was playing. And in local business news, tech darling Ethan Blackwood of Apex Tech has just announced his engagement to Chloe Street James, heiress to the Street James pharmaceutical fortune. The power couple was spotted at the Gala for the Arts last night. Danielle's head snapped up. There they were. Ethan, looking dapper in a tuxedo, his arm wrapped possessively around a woman who looked like she had been manufactured in a laboratory for billionaires. Chloe Street James, blonde, tall, wearing a dress that cost more than Danielle's life earnings. "We are just so happy," Chloe was saying to the reporter, flashing a diamond ring the size of a quail egg. "Ethan is a visionary. We've been working together on the board for months. And, well, sparks flew. Months." Danielle felt a bile rise in her throat. He hadn't just left her for being poor. He had been grooming his new life while still sleeping in her bed. He had traded her in for a status symbol. She turned off the TV, her hands shaking so hard she dropped the remote. She curled into a ball, the sobs racking her body until her ribs ached. She had no family to call. Her mother had died when she was 10, and her father, well, she didn't talk about her father's side of the family. Not ever. Her father, David, had been a rebel. He had walked away from his family, a wealthy, old-money dynasty in Connecticut, to marry her mother, a struggling artist. Because of that, his father, Silas Vane, had disowned him, cut him off completely. Danielle had never met her grandfather. She only knew him as a terrifying myth, a man who loved money more than his own flesh and blood. When her father died in a car accident 5 years ago, Silas hadn't even sent flowers. She was truly alone. The phone on the bedside table rang, making her jump. It was a harsh, mechanical trill. Danielle stared at it. Who would be calling her here? She had only given this number to the diner. She picked it up. "Hello? Is this Danielle Marie Mitchell?" A man's voice. Deep, authoritative, with a clipped British accent. Not a telemarketer. "Yes," she croaked. "Who is this?" "My name is Alistair Graham. I am the senior partner at Holloway, Graham and Associates, based in London. I have been trying to reach you on your mobile, but it appears to be disconnected. I couldn't pay the bill," Danielle admitted, shame burning her cheeks. "Look, if this is a debt collector, I am not a debt collector, Miss Mitchell," Alistair said. His tone shifted, becoming softer, almost reverent. "I am the executor of the estate of Silas Vane." Danielle went still. The air in the room seemed to get thinner. "My grandfather?" "Yes. I regret to inform you that Mr. Vane passed away 72 hours ago in his home in the Hamptons." Danielle felt a strange numbness. She shouldn't care. The man was a stranger who had let her father struggle. "I'm sorry to hear that," she said automatically, "but I don't know why you're calling me. He disowned us. He made it very clear we were nothing to him. That is what he wanted the world to believe, Alistair said. Silas Vane was a complicated man, Miss Mitchell. He was a man of tests. He believed that wealth without struggle created weak men. He watched your father leave, and though it broke his heart, he let him go because he wanted to see if David could make it on his own. He didn't, Danielle said bitterly. He died in debt. He died a man of integrity, Alistair corrected. And then Silas watched you. Danielle gripped the phone cord. He watched me? For 10 years. He had private investigators track your progress. He knew about your nursing school. He knew about the double shifts. He knew about the money you sacrificed for your husband's business. He knew all that and did nothing? Danielle cried. I was eating ramen for dinner. I was gluing my shoes together. He wanted to see if you had the grit, Alistair said. He wanted to know if you were a Vane, and he had one specific clause in his will. He called it the parasite clause. What? The inheritance was locked, Alistair explained, as long as you were married to Ethan Blackwood. Danielle's breath hitched. What did you say? Silas didn't trust him. His investigators flagged Mr. Blackwood years ago as an opportunist. Silas wrote that the moment you were free of the weight that holds you down, the trust would activate. He didn't want his life's work going to a man who would spend it on vanity. Alistair paused, the silence stretching across the line. My associates monitored the court filings, Miss Mitchell. We saw the divorce papers were filed and signed 3 days ago. We saw that Mr. Blackwood has legally severed ties. He has waived all rights to your future assets in exchange for a quick dissolution. Danielle's heart was hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. So, what does that mean? It means, Alistair said, that as of this morning, you are the sole beneficiary of the Vane estate. The shipping lines, the real estate portfolio in Manhattan and London, the liquid assets, everything. Danielle looked around the dirty motel room. She looked at her torn jeans. How much? She whispered. After taxes and charitable deductions, Alistair said, his voice calm and steady. The net worth is approximately $1.4 billion. Danielle dropped the phone. It dangled by the cord, swinging back and forth. 1.4 billion. Ethan had left her for a woman whose father was worth maybe 50 million. He had left her because she was stationary. He had handed her $5,000 like it was a king's ransom. She picked up the phone again. Her hands weren't shaking anymore. A cold steel rod had just replaced her spine. Mr. Graham? I'm here, Miss Mitchell. When can I access the funds? I have already wired a $50,000 advance to a secure account in your name at Chase Private Client. A car is on its way to pick you up from the Starlight Motel. We have a suite waiting for you at the Four Seasons. We need to discuss the strategy. Strategy? Yes, Alistair said. Silas left a letter for you. He said, when she gets the money, ask her one thing. Does she want to walk away and live in peace? Or does she want to buy the company that broke her heart? Danielle closed her eyes. She thought of Ethan's sneer. She thought of Chloe Street James flashing that ring. She thought of the bad investment. She opened her eyes. They were dry. Mr. Graham, she said, tell the driver to hurry. We have a lot of work to do. The transition from the Starlight Motel to the back seat of a Rolls-Royce Phantom was so jarring that Danielle felt physically ill. The leather seats were soft as butter. The air inside the cabin filtered and scented with something subtle, jasmine and old money. Outside the tinted windows, the gray Seattle rain smeared against the glass, blurring the world she was leaving behind. She didn't speak to the driver. She simply stared at her hands. Just hours ago, those hands had been scrubbing the motel sink with a bar of cheap soap. Now, they were resting on an armrest worth more than her father's annual salary had been. They arrived at the Four Seasons downtown. The staff didn't look at her torn jeans or her frayed sweater. Alistair Graham had clearly made a call. The manager met her at the curb, bowing his head slightly. Miss Vane, he said, using her grandfather's surname. It sounded foreign on her ears. Welcome home. We have prepared the presidential suite. Upstairs, the room was a cavern of silence and light. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the Puget Sound. There was a bouquet of white lilies on the mahogany table that was larger than a wedding centerpiece. Danielle walked to the mirror in the hallway. She looked exhausted. Dark circles rimmed her eyes, and her skin was pale. She looked like a ghost haunting a palace. "It takes getting used to," a voice said from the doorway. Alistair Graham stood there. In person, he was even more imposing than on the phone. He was an older man, perhaps in his 60s, with silver hair and a suit that was tailored to the millimeter. He held a thick leather portfolio. "I feel like an imposter," Danielle admitted, her voice barely a whisper. "Ethan used to say I had small energy, that I belonged in the background. Maybe he was right. Maybe I'm just a waitress in a rich man's house." Alistair walked over and placed the portfolio on the table. He opened it, revealing a single, yellowed envelope sealed with red wax. "Silas Vane didn't make mistakes," Alistair said gently. "And he didn't suffer fools. He watched you for a decade, Danielle. He saw you work 3 jobs. He saw you nursing the sick. He saw you manage a household budget on pennies while your husband played CEO. Silas admired resilience above all else. He despised those who were born on third base and thought they hit a triple." He pushed the envelope toward her. "Read it. Then tell me if you feel like an imposter." Danielle broke the seal. The handwriting was jagged, sharp, and forceful. "Danielle, if you are reading this, the leech is gone." "Good. I hated him. I never met him, but I knew his type. He's a man who climbs ladders built by others. You probably hate me. You should. I was a hard father and an absent grandfather. I let David drown because I thought he needed to learn to swim. I was wrong. I lost my son to my own stubbornness. I didn't want to make the same mistake with you, but I couldn't give you the money while you were tethered to that anchor. If I had given you this fortune 5 years ago, that boy would have drained you dry. He would have taken my life's work and spent it on sports cars and vanity projects. So I waited. I waited for you to see him for what he was. Now you are free. You have the Vane blood. You have the fire. I'm leaving you the sword, Danielle. It's up to you who you cut with it. Silas." Danielle lowered the letter. A tear escaped, tracking through the dust on her cheek. It wasn't sadness, exactly. It was validation. For years, Ethan had made her feel small, unintelligent, and unworthy. He had treated her like a burden. But the terrifying Silas Vane, a man who ate CEOs for breakfast, had believed in her. "He left me a sword," Danielle whispered. "Figuratively speaking," Alistair said, taking a seat and crossing his legs. "But in the literal sense, he left you Vane Capital. We own shipping fleets in the Atlantic, lithium mines in Nevada, and a controlling interest in 3 major pharmaceutical supply chains. We are the quiet giants. We don't make the news, we own the paper." Danielle sat opposite him. The fog in her brain was clearing. The despair of the motel was being replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. "Ethan mentioned Apex Tech," she said, her voice steadying. "He said they secured Series B funding. He's going to Zurich and Tokyo." Alistair nodded, pulling a tablet from his briefcase. He tapped the screen and slid it toward her. "Ethan is optimistic," Alistair corrected. "He thinks he has secured Series B. He has a verbal agreement with the Kensington Group for a $50 million injection. But papers haven't been signed. He's over-leveraged, Danielle. He spent the initial seed money on branding, offices, and appearance. He's burning cash at a rate of $200,000 a month. If the Kensington deal falls through, Apex is insolvent within 6 weeks." Danielle looked at the numbers. She didn't have a business degree, but she knew how to budget. She looked at the column marked CEO expenses, private jets, client dinners, luxury leases. "He's spending money he doesn't have," Danielle murmured. "He's trying to look successful to attract success." "Precisely. It's a house of cards." Alistair looked at her intently. "The Kensington Group is hesitant. They are looking for a reason to pull out or a partner to share the risk. They are a conservative firm." Danielle stood up and walked to the window. She looked out at the city lights, the city where Ethan was currently toasting his engagement to Chloe Street. James, probably popping a bottle of vintage Dom Perignon on a tab he couldn't pay. "Can we buy the debt?" Danielle asked. Alistair raised an eyebrow, a small smile playing on his lips. "We can do better. Vane Capital can offer to undercut Kensington. We can offer better terms. Buy out the round entirely. We can become the majority shareholder." "But he knows me," Danielle said. "If he sees my name?" "He won't," Alistair assured her. "We use a shell company. Nebula Holdings, a standard offshore vehicle. Faceless, nameless, just a checkbook with endless zeros. By the time he realizes who sits at the head of the table, the ink will be dry. Danielle pressed her hand against the cold glass. She saw her reflection, a tired woman in dirty clothes. "I need a shower," she said, "and I need clothes. Not just clothes, Alistair, I need armor. If I'm going to walk into his world, I can't look like Danielle the waitress." "I have already arranged for a stylist," Alistair said, standing up. "She arrives at 8 a.m. And Miss Vane?" "Yes?" "There is a tech summit in 3 weeks. The Innovators Ball in San Francisco. Ethan Blackwood is the keynote speaker. He plans to unveil his new fiancée and his new funding there." Danielle turned around. Her eyes were no longer the soft, pleading eyes of a neglected wife. They were hard, dark, and dangerous. "Get me an invitation," she said. "And make sure it's VIP." The transformation was not instantaneous. It was a grueling, 3-week boot camp. Danielle didn't just buy clothes. She learned how to wear them. Alistair hired a posture coach, a diction instructor, and a business analyst. From dawn until midnight, Danielle absorbed information. She learned to read balance sheets. She learned the subtle etiquette of high society, how to hold a wine glass by the stem, how to enter a room without looking at the floor, how to silence a man with a single look. She cut her hair. The long, messy brown waves that she usually tied back in a scrunchie were gone. In their place was a sharp, asymmetrical bob, dyed a deep, glossy raven black. It framed her face, highlighting cheekbones she hadn't realized she had until the stress-eating weight fell off. She wasn't Danielle Mitchell anymore. Danielle Mitchell was a victim. This woman in the mirror was Danielle Vane. The night of the Innovators Ball arrived. It was held at the Palace of Fine Arts in San Francisco, a venue of soaring rotundas and echoing marble. The air was thick with the scent of lilies and the hum of $1 billion in net worth mingling in one room. Ethan Blackwood stood near the center of the main hall, holding a glass of scotch. He looked impeccable in a midnight blue tuxedo, his smile bright and practiced. Hanging on his arm was Chloe Street James. Chloe was undeniably beautiful, in the way a statue is beautiful, cold, and perfect. She wore a silver gown that shimmered like liquid mercury. She was laughing at something a venture capitalist was saying, her hand resting possessively on Ethan's chest. "You're on fire tonight, darling," Chloe whispered to Ethan as the investor walked away. "Everyone wants a piece of Apex." "It's the momentum," Ethan said, scanning the room. He felt like a king. The divorce papers were filed. Danielle was gone, probably crying in a trailer park somewhere, and he was about to close the deal of a lifetime. Once Kensington signs next week, we're untouchable. "Have you heard about Nebula Holdings?" Chloe asked, sipping her champagne. "Daddy mentioned them. He said they've been sniffing around the deal. Very mysterious." "Let them sniff," Ethan scoffed. "I don't care whose money it is, as long as the check clears. I just need to get through the keynote speech." Across the room, the heavy oak doors opened. Usually, when doors open at a party, no one notices. But the silence that rippled through the entryway was contagious. It spread from the back of the room toward the front, like a wave. Ethan frowned, turning to see what was distracting his audience. A woman was walking down the grand staircase. She was wearing a gown of deep velvet crimson, a blood-red slash against the sea of black tuxedos and silver dresses. The dress was structured, architectural, with a high neck and a plunging back. It was conservative, yet incredibly provocative. She wore no jewelry except for a pair of vintage emerald drop earrings that caught the light with every step. Her walk was slow, deliberate. Every step clicked on the marble, echoing slightly. "Who is that?" Chloe asked, her voice tight. "Is she an actress?" Ethan squinted. The woman's hair was short, sharp. Her makeup was bold, a dark red lip that matched the dress. She looked powerful, intimidating, and familiar. Ethan felt a strange prickle on the back of his neck. He knew that walk, but the context was wrong. That walk belonged to a woman carrying a tray of pancakes, not a woman descending the stairs like she owned the building. The woman reached the bottom of the stairs. Alistair Graham stepped out from the crowd, looking like a distinguished bodyguard, and offered her his arm. She took it, but she didn't look at him. She looked straight ahead, straight at Ethan. Ethan's glass slipped in his hand, sloshing scotch over his knuckles. "Danielle?" he mouthed. It couldn't be. Danielle was frumpy. Danielle wore oversized hoodies. Danielle apologized for taking up space. This woman looked like she would burn the building down if the temperature wasn't to her liking. "Do you know her?" Chloe asked, sensing his tension. I think it's my ex-wife," Ethan stammered, his face draining of color. Chloe let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. "The waitress?" "Ethan, don't be absurd. That woman is wearing a vintage Dior. That dress costs more than your first car. And she's with Alistair Graham. He's the shark who manages the Vane estate. Why would your diner waitress ex be with the most powerful executor in London?" Ethan shook his head. "I don't know. But I need to find out." Panic began to bubble in his chest. Was she crashing? Was she here to make a scene? To beg? If she caused a scene in front of the Kensington investors, it could ruin everything. "Stay here," Ethan ordered Chloe. He pushed through the crowd, his heart hammering. He intercepted Danielle just as she was taking a glass of sparkling water from a passing tray. "Danielle," he hissed, grabbing her elbow. Danielle stopped. She didn't flinch. She slowly lowered her gaze to his hand on her arm, looking at it with mild disgust, as if a cockroach had landed on her velvet sleeve. She looked up, locking eyes with him. Her eyes were cool, devoid of the warmth he used to manipulate. "Mr. Blackwood," she said. Her voice was different. The pitch was lower, the enunciation crisp. "You're wrinkling the fabric. Please remove your hand." "What the hell are you doing here?" Ethan whispered furiously, leaning in close. "How did you get in? Did you sleep with the bouncer? Look, Danielle, I gave you the 5,000. If you're here to beg for more, you're making a huge mistake." Danielle laughed. It was a soft, dry sound. "Beg? Oh, Ethan, you always did have an active imagination." "Lower your voice," Ethan snapped, glancing around to see if anyone was watching. "You don't belong here. Look at you. Playing dress up. Who paid for this? Did you find a sugar daddy already?" He sneered, trying to regain the upper hand. "Or did you spend every penny I gave you on one rental dress just to make me jealous?" "It's pathetic, Danielle. Chloe is here. She's the real deal. You're just a knockoff." Danielle took a sip of her water, unbothered. She stepped closer to him, invading his personal space. She smelled of santal and danger. "I'm not here for you, Ethan," she said calmly. "I'm here for business." "Business?" Ethan scoffed loudly. "What business? Unless they need someone to refill the coffee urns, you have no business here." "Actually," a deep voice interrupted. Alistair Graham stepped forward, smoothly inserting himself between Ethan and Danielle. He looked at Ethan with the bored expression of a man watching a fly buzz against a window. "Mr. Blackwood," Alistair said, "I would advise you to speak with more respect. You are addressing the head of Nebula Holdings." The world stopped for Ethan. The noise of the party faded into a high-pitched ring in his ears. "What?" Ethan choked out. "Nebula? The investors?" "The majority investors," Danielle corrected him. A small, cruel smile touched her lips, the first emotion she had shown all night. "We've been reviewing your financials, Ethan. They're concerning. We have a lot to discuss before I decide if Apex is worth saving." She leaned in, her lips brushing his ear. "And by the way," she whispered, "the dress isn't a rental. I own the company that made it." She pulled back, gave him a polite nod, and walked past him, leaving him standing in the middle of the ballroom floor, paralyzed, while the crimson train of her gown swept over his polished shoes like a trail of blood. The morning sun hit the glass facade of the Apex Tech building, turning it into a blinding pillar of light in downtown Seattle. It was a building designed to intimidate chrome, steel, and aggressive minimalism. Danielle Vane stood in the elevator, watching the floor numbers climb. 10, 15, 20. Beside her, Alistair Graham adjusted his silk tie. He checked his watch. "The Kensington Group sent their rejection letter at 8 a.m. sharp," he said quietly. "Ethan received it 10 minutes ago. Right now, he is a man watching his parachute fail to open." Danielle didn't smile. She smoothed the lapel of her white crepe blazer. Today wasn't about vengeance in the hot, fiery sense. It was about something colder. It was an autopsy of a marriage, conducted in a boardroom. "Does he know I'm coming?" Danielle asked. "He knows Nebula Holdings is coming," Alistair replied. "He doesn't know the face of the executioner." The elevator doors slid open with a soft chime. The Apex lobby was a hive of nervous energy. Word had clearly spread. The receptionist, A young woman named Jessica, who used to give Danielle pitying looks when she brought Ethan his lunch, froze. Her eyes went wide as she took in Danielle's appearance, the tailored suit, the Birkin bag, the aura of absolute command. Mrs. Blackwood? Jessica stammered. Miss Vane? Danielle corrected, not breaking stride. Is he in? He's in the conference room. With the board. But I don't think... Danielle walked past her, Alistair flanking her like a shadow. She pushed open the heavy double doors of the main conference room. The room fell silent. Ethan was standing at the head of the table, his tie loosened, his hair disheveled. He looked like he hadn't slept. Around the table sat 4 other men, the minor investors and board members. They all looked grim. Ethan stopped mid-sentence. He stared at Danielle. His face went through a complex series of contortions, shock, confusion, and then a desperate, clawing hope. Danielle, he breathed. He actually took a step toward her. You came. He turned to the board members. A frantic smile plastered on his face. Gentlemen, this is my wife. My ex-wife. She's here to support me. Danielle walked to the opposite end of the long oak table. She didn't sit. She placed her leather portfolio on the surface with a heavy thud. I'm not here to support you, Ethan, she said. Her voice was calm, carrying effortless authority. I'm here to audit you. Audit? One of the board members, a heavy-set man named Mr. Henderson, looked up. Who is this? Blackwood. This is Danielle Vane, Alistair announced, stepping forward. She is the sole proprietor of Nebula Holdings, the entity that currently holds 40% of your bridge loan debt. The air left the room. Ethan gripped the back of his chair, his knuckles turning white. You? Ethan whispered. Your Nebula? That's impossible. You have nothing. You're a waitress. Was, Danielle said. She opened the portfolio. Now, I am the person holding the mortgage on this office. I am the person who owns the server farm you lease in Oregon. And I am the only person in this city willing to write a check to keep Apex from filing Chapter 11 bankruptcy by Friday. She slid a document down the table. It spun smoothly across the polished wood and stopped right in front of Ethan. The Kensington deal is dead, Ethan, Danielle said. They don't like risk. And you are high risk. Ethan looked at the document. It was a term sheet. But it wasn't a partnership agreement. It was a hostile takeover. Ethan's voice shook as he read. This gives Nebula controlling interest. 60% equity. You're demoting me. I'd be an employee in my own company. You'd be the chief technical officer, Danielle corrected. You're a good coder, Ethan. You're just a terrible CEO. You spend too much on appearances and not enough on product. You treat people like assets to be liquidated. She leaned forward, her hands resting on the table. Here is the offer. Nebula injects $20 million immediately. We pay off the debts. We keep the lights on. In exchange, I take the chairwoman's seat. I control the board. I control the budget. And you. She paused, her eyes locking onto his. You get a salary, a modest one. Based on performance. I won't sign this, Ethan spat, his ego flaring up. It's insulting. I built this. I am Apex. Then you can explain to these gentlemen, Danielle gestured to the board members, why their stock options will be worth $0 on Monday morning. Mr. Henderson cleared his throat. He looked at Ethan with cold calculation. Ethan, he rumbled. If Kensington is out, we have no other liquidity. If Miss Vane is offering a lifeline, we have to take it. She's doing this out of spite, Ethan shouted, pointing a shaking finger at her. Don't you see? She's my ex-wife. She's bitter because I left her. This isn't business. It's a vendetta. Danielle didn't flinch. She turned to Alistair. Mr. Graham, please show the board the due diligence report. Alistair handed out folders to the board members. Page 4. Danielle instructed. Ethan used company funds to lease a penthouse apartment in Belltown under a Shell LLC. Page 6. $80,000 in consulting fees paid to a firm owned by Chloe Street, James's father, a bribe to get a meeting that ultimately failed. Page 10. Personal expenses charged to the corporate account, including a Cartier bracelet purchased 3 days before he asked me for a divorce. The board members flipped through the pages. The silence was heavy, suffocating. Ethan shrank. He looked small. "It's not a vendetta, Ethan," Danielle said softly. "It's a correction. You called me a bad investment. I'm just proving that I know how to manage my assets better than you do." She checked her watch. A platinum Cartier tank, a gift from her grandfather's collection. "You have until 5 p.m. to sign," she said. "If not, Nebula pulls the offer, and I let the bank foreclose on Monday. I'll buy the IP at the bankruptcy auction for pennies on the dollar." She turned and walked to the door. "Danielle!" Ethan cried out, his voice cracking. He sounded like a child lost in a supermarket. She stopped, her hand on the brass handle. She didn't turn around. "It's Miss Vane," she said. And then she walked out, leaving him in a room full of men who were already looking at him like he was a dead man walking. The fallout was slow and agonizing. Danielle didn't stay in Seattle to watch the ink dry. She flew to New York for meetings regarding the Vane shipping interests, leaving Alistair to handle the transition at Apex. She wanted Ethan to sweat. She wanted him to sit in that glass office, staring at the phone, realizing that his boss was the woman whose heart he had broken. But 3 days later, she returned to the Four Seasons. It was raining again, a quintessential Seattle downpour. She was sitting in the lounge, drinking tea, when the concierge approached. "Miss Vane," he said discreetly, "Mr. Blackwood is here." "He is." Insistent. "He says it is a personal emergency." Danielle sighed. She had expected this. Send him up, but leave the door open and have security stand by the elevator. Minutes later, Ethan appeared. He looked worse than he had at the board meeting. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a frantic, hollowed-out look. He wasn't wearing a suit. He was wearing jeans and a raincoat that was soaked through. He stood in the entryway of the suite, dripping water onto the marble floor. "She left me," Ethan said. "No hello. No preamble." Danielle set her teacup down. "Chloe?" "She saw the term sheet," Ethan said, his voice dull. "She saw that I'm not the majority shareholder anymore. She called me a fraud. She said she couldn't marry a middle manager. She gave the ring back." He laughed, a bitter, jagged sound. "She didn't even hand it to me. She left it on the counter with a note." Danielle looked at him. She searched for pity in her heart. She found none. She remembered the nights she had spent alone while he was networking with Chloe. She remembered the eviction notices she hid from him so he wouldn't stress. "I'm sorry to hear that, Ethan," she said neutrally. "But I fail to see how this concerns me." Ethan walked into the room, his eyes pleading. "Danielle, please. Stop this. I know what you're doing. You're punishing me. Okay, I get it. I was a jerk. I was cruel. I got caught up in the hype. I lost myself." He fell to his knees by the armchair she was sitting in. He reached for her hand, but she pulled it away. "I remember us," he said, his voice trembling. "I remember the sophomore dance. I remember the night we drove to the coast and slept in the car. You loved me, Danielle. You loved me when I was nobody. Doesn't that mean anything?" "It means everything," Danielle said. Her voice was sharp, cutting through his nostalgia. "It means I loved you when you had nothing, and you left me the moment you thought you had something better. It proves that my love was real, and yours was conditional." "I can change," Ethan begged. "Cancel the deal. Give me back control. Let's try again. You have the money now. We can be the power couple I always talked about. We can rule this city, you and me, like we promised." Danielle looked at him with profound sadness. He still didn't get it. He thought her money was the solution. He thought he could just slide back into her life because she was wealthy now. "Ethan," she said, "do you know why I have this money?" He blinked, confused. "Your grandfather. He died." "He died," Danielle nodded. "But he left a condition. It was called the parasite clause." Ethan frowned. "Parasite?" "He knew who you were," Danielle said. "He watched you for 10 years. He saw you drain my savings. He saw you let me work myself to the bone while you played pretend CEO. He hated you, Ethan. He hated you so much that he locked my inheritance." She leaned forward, her eyes burning into his. "The will stated that I could only access the funds after we were divorced. If I had stayed with you, I would have died poor. You were literally the only thing standing between me and $1 billion. Ethan recoiled as if she had slapped him. He sat back on his heels, his mouth opening and closing. "If you had been a good husband," Danielle continued relentlessly, "if you had been kind, I might never have signed those papers. I might have stayed with you, and we would have struggled together. But because you were greedy, because you discarded me like trash, you handed me the keys to the kingdom. The irony hit him. He could see it in his eyes, the crushing realization. He had walked away from $1 billion to chase a woman worth a fraction of that, and in doing so, he had activated the very fortune he so desperately craved. Ethan choked. I did this? You did this, Danielle confirmed. You are the architect of your own destruction, and the architect of my success. She stood up. The movement was final. Go home, Ethan. Go to your job. Be a good CTO. Report to the board on Monday. If you perform well, I might give you a raise next year. You can't do this, he whispered. I'm your husband. Check the papers, Ethan, Danielle said, walking to the door and holding it open. Security was waiting in the hall. You're just my employee. Ethan stood up slowly. He looked around the suite one last time at the luxury, the power, the woman who had outgrown him in every conceivable way. He looked like he wanted to scream, to break something. But he had no fight left. He was bankrupt in every sense of the word. He walked out into the hallway, his shoulders slumped. Danielle closed the door. The latch clicked a sound of finality. She leaned her forehead against the wood for a moment, taking a deep breath. It was over. The ghost was exorcised. But just as she turned back to the room, her phone rang. It was Alistair. Miss Vane, Alistair's voice was urgent. We have a problem. What is it? Danielle asked, her adrenaline spiking again. Did he sign? He signed, Alistair said. But someone else is contesting the takeover. It seems Silas Vane had one other secret, a silent partner in the shipping firm who has right of first refusal on any transfer of power. Who? Danielle demanded. A man named Julian Thorne, Alistair said. He just landed in Seattle. And Danielle, he says the Vane fortune isn't fully yours yet. He claims Silas promised him a test, too. A test involving you. Danielle gripped the phone. The drama wasn't over. It was just shifting battlegrounds. Bring him to me, Danielle said, her eyes narrowing. If he wants to test me, he's going to find out I don't fail twice. The meeting with the man who held the final key to the Vane Empire took place not in a boardroom, but on the deck of a container ship docked in the port of Seattle. It was raining, the cold wind whipping off the dark water. But Danielle didn't shiver. She stood in her trench coat, watching the cranes load massive steel containers stamped with the Vane Logistics logo. The man, Thorne, stood by the railing. He was younger than Alistair, perhaps in his 40s, with the weathered look of a man who had spent more time at sea than in a corner office. Silas told me you were soft, Thorne said, not turning to face her. He said you had a good heart but a soft spine. He was worried that once you got the money, you'd liquidate the fleet and move to Tuscany. Silas didn't know me, Danielle replied, her voice cutting through the wind. He watched me, but he didn't know me. He didn't know that surviving a man like Ethan Blackwood requires more strength than running a company. Thorne turned. He held a document in his hand, the release form that would grant her total, unchecked control of the shipping lanes. Or, if she failed his assessment, the document that would force a mandatory buyout, leaving her rich but powerless. The shipping industry is ugly, Miss Vane, Thorne said. It's unions, it's tariffs, it's storms that sink $100 million of cargo in 10 minutes. Ethan Blackwood broke because he couldn't handle the pressure of a tech startup. This is a war zone. Danielle stepped forward. She didn't blink. I know, she said. I've spent the last 3 weeks analyzing the routes. Your Pacific fleet is bleeding money because of outdated fuel contracts in Singapore. You're overinsured on the Atlantic runs and underinsured in the South China Sea. If we renegotiate the fuel levies and modernize the tracking systems using Apex's tech, which I now control, we increase margins by 12% in the first quarter. Thorne paused. His eyes narrowed, assessing her. He hadn't expected her to know the logistics. He had expected a socialite. You read the reports, he noted. I memorized them, Danielle corrected. And I don't want to go to Tuscany. I want to build. Ethan treated people like disposable assets. I intend to treat this company like a family. That's the difference between a boss and a leader. A slow smile spread across Thorne's face. He looked down at the document, then back at her. He pulled a pen from his jacket pocket, signed the bottom line, and handed it to her. Silas was wrong, Thorne said. You're not soft. your steel wrapped in velvet. The fleet is yours, Danielle. 6 months later, Business Insider featured a new face on its cover. It wasn't Ethan Blackwood. It was Danielle Vane, titled The Phoenix of the Sound. Ethan saw the magazine on a newsstand as he walked to the bus stop. He was still the CTO of Apex, but his authority was gone. He reported to a board that watched his every move. He lived in a small studio apartment, saving money to pay off the debts from his high-flying days. Chloe Street James had married a hedge fund manager in Fast Vegas wedding 2 weeks prior. Ethan looked at Danielle's photo. She looked radiant, strong, and untouchable. He reached out, his finger hovering over her face on the glossy paper, remembering the warmth of her hand when she used to comfort him after a bad day. He had held a diamond in his hand and traded it for a piece of glass. He pulled his collar up against the rain and kept walking. Danielle Vane had moved on to conquer the world. Ethan Blackwood was just learning how to live in it. And that is the story of Danielle Vane. It's a reminder that sometimes, the person who discards you is doing you the greatest favor of your life. Ethan thought he was cutting off dead weight, but he was actually cutting the anchor that was keeping Danielle from sailing. In life, people will try to value you based on their own limited perspective. They will look at your current struggle and assume it's your permanent identity. But like Danielle, your lowest moment isn't the end of your story. It's often the prologue to your greatest chapter. True wealth isn't just the $1 billion in the bank. It's the realization that you are capable, you are resilient, and you are worthy with or without someone else's approval. If you enjoyed this story of revenge, redemption, and success, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow and lets me know you want more stories like this. Do you think Danielle was right to keep Ethan as an employee, or should she have fired him completely? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you haven't already, subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new story. I'll see you in the next video.